Hello, everyone, and welcome to Wheelchair Wednesday Chat. Today, we're going to talk a little bit and reflect about how other people perceive us. I think it's important because sometimes we don't think about that. We assume that they understand our needs as we're in a wheelchair, whether it's power or manual. And then things happen, and we're like, what the heck? Why did that person do that? But I think that it's important to get their perspective so that when we're in line, when we're in the grocery store, when we're out in the street, that we're prepared. That they have a weird perception of us. So let's talk about a minute, a general perspective of how other people see us. And I'm talking about the general public. Maybe not so much a family member, but maybe a cousin hasn't seen us in a long time, or a friend who hasn't seen us in a long time, and the general population. So I think when we're in a wheelchair, they perceive or they think that all of a sudden we can't speak and we can't hear and we're we can't do anything. So they do weird things. They will come up and push us out of the way, or they'll bump us, or crazy stuff, because they have the idea that we're just not there, or that we can't, especially because we can't speak or hear. And I don't know where that comes from, but they do. So so we really need to be aware that, to cover our joystick or turn it off, if we're in a crowd, because they will bump us or fool around with the joystick, and bad things can happen. So I think, it's important for us to speak up sometimes. People start getting too close to me in a grocery store, I'll say, hello, how are you? So they know that, I do function. I do see them. So it's kind of like that. Do you see me? I see you. So kind of thing. Because all of a sudden, from the general public, we're blind, we can't speak, and we can't hear. So, which is far from the truth, as we know. But I think to be aware of their perspective, that and all of a sudden that we're indolent. I'm going to use a harsh word here. That we're indolent and we can't do anything. There must be somebody at home. There must be somebody helping us do everything. They don't realize that we have our own independence. Whether in our independence will look like different from one person to another who uses a wheelchair, but we are independent. So, and they don't realize that if we have a girlfriend or a boyfriend or friends, they must think, or they do think that that poor girlfriend or poor boyfriend, they're doing everything in the house and they're helping us with everything, which is far from the truth, as we know. So, in those perspectives, education is everything. And so even for us who drive, it doesn't even go through their mind that, a person in a wheelchair can drive. So then they think we're faking it because, oh, if we're driving, then we don't need a wheelchair. It's like, oh. So, it's that perception that, it takes a lot of education. But and we have to be cautious when we're in a crowd of people who don't know us and don't understand. So, as I've said in previous videos, I turn off my joystick when I'm in a crowd talking, because the caution of their bumping the joystick is precarious for us, because the joystick is very sensitive. And or they think that it's fun to just play around with the joystick, and it's not. This is part of our body, and without knowing it, they could hurt themselves. Once I had, and this is an interesting story, I think I've told it before, that I had a friend who She broke her ankle. She fell down the stairs. She fainted. She fell down the stairs and she broke her ankle. And she was in a medical wheelchair. And we were both going to school together, the same school. And so I offered to take her to school because it was the right foot. She couldn't drive. So that's what we did, So she would stand up on one foot, get in the car, and I would take the heavy-duty medical wheelchair. I'd fold it up and put it in the trunk. And one day when I was getting to school, I was arriving at school, and I got the wheelchair out, and one of my tutors was watching me. He tutored me in math, and he was in a power wheelchair because he had cerebral palsy. So he watched me do the whole thing, take out the wheelchair and got her in the wheelchair and all that kind of stuff and wheeled her into school. So he called me aside at one point in the lab, and he said, hey, I saw you this morning, pick up that wheelchair, and that was great, but those wheelchairs are really heavy, up to 40 pounds, and I want you to be careful. And so here's my tutor, in a wheelchair himself. He said, those wheelchairs are really heavy, and so I want you to keep your back straight when you pick it up and all that kind of stuff, because that wheelchair could do some damage on your back. So I promised him that I would be careful, and I did sprain my back a little bit towards the end, and it was tough. It was tough picking up, that medical wheelchair, because it was about 40 pounds, so it was just a regular medical manual wheelchair. So people don't realize the weight of our equipment, and they don't realize that it requires taking care of, keeping it clean, changing tires, taking it into the shop. So they think that somebody does that for us, and it just stays that way. And it doesn't. This is equipment that we need to take care of. So ourselves usually, or we alert somebody if they could help us. So it's that perspective. If we understand their stance, I think that then we can take a better stance and educate, so that, if somebody starts leaning over us or trying to, then we'll say, hey, excuse me, and sometimes speaking out or speaking up will help them say, oh, this person can speak. It all sounds funny, but it's not. It's just weird how people can just think that we can't do anything. All of a sudden we're in a wheelchair, or that it is bad to talk about, the wheelchair use, so they won't say anything and you won't say anything. And if the more comfortable you are about it, then everybody else around you will be comfortable as well, be relaxed. And I've said that before in a couple of videos, that when you're dealing with a situation, that the more comfortable you are about a situation, people will be more relaxed. So sometimes they want to help you in everything. You go to a restaurant, you found a good restaurant that's accessible, and you go in there with your friends, and they're hyper alert and hyper trying to help you. If you're relaxed and just say, no, I'll just take this chair out and I'll sit right here, or, and they're asking you every 2 minutes, do you have everything you need? Can I help you with something? It's like, no, I'm fine. The waiter will come in a few minutes, and and the world will be just great. So I think it's really important for us to speak up and say, no, I'm good. I have a lot of practice doing this, so they'll relax as well. But if we're uptight, they're going to be uptight, and it's going to be a weird situation, just plain weird. So, it's those misconceptions. I remember I had a service dog, hearing dog, because I'm hearing impaired, And back in the day, a family invited me out to dinner, and I was having a balance issue, so my service dog was helping me with that, and I would have to put a harness on him and a handle so I could hold on, because once I held on to something, that would correct the balance issue. So I was holding on to Johnny, and we were at the door at the restaurant waiting for someone, the host, to seat us. And I think the waiter kind of looked at us and asked if I needed a Braille menu. So everybody in the family knew me well, and they kind of looked at each other, and they looked at me, and I couldn't hear. I didn't hear the conversation of what was going on, but they took care of it. And so we seated, and Johnny laid down underneath the table. And so I said, what was the waiter asking? I said, well, if you needed a Braille menu. So we all got a laugh at it and a laugh about it. So, but it's those things, that they perceive the worst. So I could see fine. And the family knew that. It was just, they just took care of it. But, all of a sudden, we're blind, we're deaf, we're mute when we're in the wheelchair, or we have a service dog. So it's just best for them to just say, how can I help you? And the person can say, what they need help with. So, perceptions from other people can be just so weird and off this planet that it is really important for us to be ready to educate, and be firm if somebody's getting too close or leaning on you or putting your hand on your equipment. And it's just weird. I don't know why they think that, but some people have never seen someone in a wheelchair. Some people think negatively about people who are in wheelchairs. Some people see us in a positive way or in a curious way, or, so those who see us in a negative way, like, it's just not gonna, like, you're in a wheelchair, but you can walk, and that wheelchair is doing harm to you, so you should just get up and walk. I'm telling you, the perceptions of other people are just really random and strange. So it's just really important for us to build patience, for us to build firmness, because sometimes you can say, hey, excuse me, can you back up? I'm in a wheelchair and I need space to get the food. I'll be, through the line in a few seconds, but please back up. I need space. So, I think the moment we speak up, then it's like, oh, they can talk. So that just makes me laugh, but it's just, out of this world. And some people will have experience because they're taking care of somebody, so they'll know to keep a little space and to give you time to get through the line, or to, get that item in the grocery store. It's just that moment in which somebody starts to try to push you, in a power wheelchair, or to fool around with your gadgets on the power wheelchair. So that's when you need to begin to speak up and say, hey, excuse me, you need to back off. This is my equipment, and it's not appropriate for you to be fooling around with it. So sometimes we have to be firm, and hopefully they'll be apologetic, and sometimes they'll just walk off because they're embarrassed. But, I think on our part, it's just important for us to be ready for the weirdness, ready for the people who are not educated about the use of wheelchairs, whether it's manual or power. We need to be ready for that, and to be gentle, and we need to be gentle, but to be pretty firm when we need to be firm. And I just did a video on this because, in another Glamour newspaper, they had a really good article about someone who had a horrible experience in which she was on the sidewalk. She was just going her own way, and someone came from behind and started pushing her without saying anything, without asking, nothing. She just, and she really had a hard time just, with the situation. I would have too. That is really creepy when someone starts to push you with no permission, not talking to you at all. It's just awful. Thank goodness for the person who is non-disabled who spoke to the person firmly and asked him or her to stop it and let go of that wheelchair. So I think the more educated we are about the strange perceptions that are out there, the better prepared we will be to respond. I think that's what I'm trying to say in this, podcast. So, I think it would be good to ask out there and learn as much as we can about how the public understands wheelchair and wheelchair use, so that we are better prepared to respond to the different and odd and strange and bizarre reactions that a person might have to us. So I think that's really what I want to say for us as wheelchair users. Sometimes we want, they need to be educated, and I'm going to educate them. But sometimes we need to flip things around and just say, no, I need to educate myself about how the public or how a family member or how a friend perceives or understands my use of a wheelchair. I have people who think I should never use a wheelchair. I have the ability to walk some, but I have to use a walker, and I have to be very aware as to, my strength and my balance. And if it's off, I got to get my butt back in the wheelchair. So it's a safety device for me. And especially because, sometimes I change or fool around with my medications and that just, throws me off. So, and I have instructions to always use it when I'm outdoors. So, I don't know. Some people just think negatively. So, for those who think that I should never use a wheelchair, well, it's not up to them. It's up to me and my therapist. We've talked about this, and it's a safety need, and I will never walk the way I used to. And some of you out there will never walk ever again. And some people think that you can just get up and walk. So my invitation to you is for all of us to educate ourselves about the weird things that people think about or perceive about people who use wheelchairs. And if we have and educate ourselves about those positions that people hold about, wheelchairs and the use of wheelchairs, then we will be better prepared to respond out in public. So, this is the person who thinks that this person thinks that I can't speak or I can't see or I can't hear. So let me speak up. Which I do a lot of times in grocery stores, and especially if it's a little crowded, I'll just, good morning, so they know I can speak, I can hear, and I can see. So that could be an advantage for us to educate ourselves the best we can, because you can't educate yourself in everything, but to the best of your ability. And if you have a family member who's just die hard on you shouldn't be in a wheelchair, then take a moment to talk to them and see if you can share some ideas or educate them in terms of your use of the wheelchair, and see if that's helpful to them. Sometimes it's not worth it because they're just stuck in one position or one idea or one opinion. So, and it's not worth it. So it's just best for you to move on. So we need to know when to move on as well. So I will leave that to all of us to think and learn and research on how people think about the use of wheelchairs and how that will alert us and educate us and how we can develop the different responses. All right. Well, thank you everyone for coming. Thank you everyone for your subscriptions. You know, we're very, very close to 200 subscribers, and I usually don't ask for this. I you know, it might be in a closing video, but I really appreciate it. I hope everyone is getting something out of each video, and I will see you in the next one.